Hey, Steve Stine from GuitarZoom here. Thank you so much for joining me. Over the next 3 videos that I'm going to be releasing, I'm going to be trying to help you learn how to play chords more effectively, how to strum more effectively, and how to put those two things together to be able to play songs. Oftentimes when you're first learning how to play guitar, you learn how to play some chords like G or A or something like that. And then you learn maybe a strumming pattern or something, but it's really hard to try and kind of get those two to work together to ultimately be able to play songs. So what I'm going to be doing in celebration of my guitar course, How to Play Guitar in 8 Weeks. It's an 8-week comprehensive study to get you off and running and learning how to play the guitar. We're going to talk about these 3 points of interest. So today, this first video, what we're going to do is we're going to be looking at chords, and how we can take those chords and try and make them a little bit more efficiently. Okay, so there's 3 things that I always tell people when it comes to chords. Number 1, you've got to be able to visualize it. Okay, if you can see it, you can play it. And I know that seems silly, but it's true. Like if you're thinking about playing, let's say, a D chord, right? So I'm going to make a D chord. And it's okay if you don't know D, or, this applies to any chord that you might know. But if I have to look at a chart or a picture to be able to identify what the chord is that I'm trying to make, or to remind me what it is, it's going to take too long, right? I need to be able to see it in my head. So the first thing you need to do is visualize it. So what I have my students do, for instance, is if we're talking about a D chord, I ask them to tell me, where do their fingers go, right? What strings are you strumming and which fingers go where? And so they'll say, okay, so for a D chord, you would play the 4th string open, and then you'd play the 3rd string on the 2nd fret with your 1st finger, and you'd play the 2nd string with your ring finger at the 3rd fret, and then you'd play the 1st string with your middle finger at the 2nd fret, right? So what they're doing is they're visualizing the chord, and they're telling me where their fingers go, and it's a great thing to do, okay? And then the second thing is you visualize that picture of that chord in your head. Again, it doesn't need to be D. It can be any chord you're working on, right? But you visualize it in your head. So when you look down at your guitar, you see what you want. That's step number 1. Step number 2, what you do is you repetitively need to make that chord over and over and over. One of the big mistakes that I did when I was first learning how to play guitar is that I would make a chord like D. Again, I'm going to keep using D as my example here. And then I would strum it, working on whatever strumming pattern it was I was doing. And we'll talk about all of that in the second video. But in reality, my hand isn't really learning how to make a D chord when I do that. I'm just making the chord and then leaving it there. What I need to do is develop muscle memory by doing it over and over and over. And I call this technique bouncing. And we're going to go in far more detail with all of these things in How to Play Guitar in 8 Weeks, okay? But what you can practice is, let's say, whatever chord you're working on, or whatever chord it is that you find yourself struggling with, whether it's an open chord or a bar chord, or a cage chord, or wherever it is that you are in your guitar journey, right? What you're going to do is you're going to take your fingers and you're going to pretend like they are super glued together, right? So what you're going to do is take this D chord and you're going to try and lift the fingers up and then set it back down. Lift it up and then set it back down. And what you're going to try and do is do that over and over and over. And it has nothing to do with how fast you're doing it. I always call it the rock star syndrome, where for some reason, when we first start learning how to play guitar, we're told that we're not supposed to look at our guitar like there's anything else really to look at, right? You should look at your guitar just like you should look at the road when you're driving, okay? There's nothing wrong with looking at your guitar. Once you get to a certain level, you probably don't have to look at your guitar all the time anymore, and that's fine. It's a natural progression. But when you first start playing, you should be looking at your guitar and seeing where your fingers go. So when you make that D chord, you're thinking about how it feels all the way from your neck, down your shoulder, down your arm to your fingers, and then you practice lifting it up and maintaining that shape. So it isn't how fast can you do it. That's really not the point. It's when you lift your fingers up, can you maintain that shape and hold it? And then can you set it back down, and do your fingers go exactly where they're supposed to, or do they shift to other strings? And if they do, that's what you need to work on. So as I lift this D chord up, I hold it, and then I set it back down. I'll do this sideways here so you can see this too. So if I lift it up and then set it back down. And I'm very aware that I'm trying to set it in the right spot. We know that if we move too far back this way, it becomes hard to play the chords. We want to get up as close as we can to the next fret wire, right? as best we can. So we need to work on that too. So as we're lifting it and then setting it back down, we don't want to be way back here somewhere. We want to think about exactly where we're setting it and then lifting it up. So it's completely a feel thing. You're visualizing, and then you're feeling it from your shoulder on down, trying to figure out exactly where that is, and you practice that. And it's a great practice because it doesn't require you to strum. You don't even have to plug in your guitar if you have an electric. And you can practice it when there's other people around and you're not bothering anybody. But the trick is learning to focus, right? Don't just do it and, be watching TV or something like that. Really try and learn to put your thought process into what it is that you're trying to do. Feel it. Think about it, right? So as you're playing that D chord, you're lifting it up, you're setting it back down, and you're training yourself with muscle memory to make that chord the same way every single time. So then what I have people do is I have them set their hand down on their lap, and then I tell them to make a chord. So I might say, make D, right? So then what they do is they look at their guitar, they visualize it, and then they lift their hand up. And notice how as I lift my hand up, I'm already making the chord. I'm not waiting till I get to the guitar neck to make the chord, because then it's going to be too late. I want to make it before I ever get there and then set it down. Okay? So that's a great way to practice your chords. Now let's say you get really good at D, right? And the next chord that you want to learn or you need for a particular song or something like that is A. Okay, so you would go through the same process with an A chord, trying to figure out what fingers work best, all that sort of thing. And again, we'll talk about all of that in the guitar course, but you're training yourself to make that chord. And then what you do is you start practicing bouncing between the two of them. Okay, so there's a lot of really great tips and things like that to try and work on this. So give it your undivided attention when you're practicing, anytime for the rest of your life, right? And try and work on things that seem logical. If you try and strum and you try and move your chords and all that at the same time, and if it's working, great. But if it's not working for you, maybe separate all of this stuff and learn to practice just one thing at a time to develop it. Because these chords aren't going anywhere. You're going to be using these for the rest of your life, depending on what style of music you play. I don't think there's a day that goes by that I don't play some element of what we call open chords, G or D or A or something like that. And so it's really important for us to develop those. So do me a favor, if you're interested, somewhere around here is going to be a link that you can click on and learn more about how to play guitar in 8 weeks. It's constructed off of what I've been doing for years in my guitar classes. I love to teach classes because I love to teach people that don't know how to play and watch them get excited about learning to play guitar. It's just an awesome thing. And so this guitar course is very much based off of that idea with a new set of material to practice every single week, right? So go ahead and work on that. See if you can develop a good routine of just practicing your chords, okay? Again, never worry about quantity. Don't worry about whether or not you know 10 chords. Just work on what you do know really well, right? If you don't know any of them really well, start with one chord and develop it. And then move to another chord and develop that one, and then start trying to bounce back and forth between them. And again, we've got a system for all of that stuff in the course, but if that makes sense to you, I want you to work on that. And then in the next video, what we're going to do is we're going to implement rhythm into this as well. So take care, check out the link wherever it is, and stay positive and keep practicing.